Greetings, fellow watchers and racers. I am doing something completely different than what we normally see on the channel, but it's also quite related. It has something to do with driving and, in a sense, racing. Of course, I'm not necessarily racing at the moment, but I take it back. That's exactly what I'm doing. I'm racing the clock. I am at work at the moment. And I just saw a video. If anyone knows who Wombo Leader is, he's a YouTuber, and he just basically did a video about whether or not Gran Turismo is a sim racing game or not. Now, I didn't get to watch the whole thing because, of course, I was at work and I got to see a little bit of it. Now, one of the things that I normally do is anytime we get to a point to where we're talking about what anything is, anything in the universe, it has a basic definition as a thing because it's a noun. It's a form of speech. It has something to do with language. In this very particular language, we're talking about English. You know, we have to distinguish between England English, which I'm pretty sure what English is probably named after, and American English, but they still have the same basic foundations. So, as far as whether Gran Turismo, the racing game, is it a simulator? Well, you have to go look up the definition of what a simulator is. And if you look up the term simulator, you're going to see words like counterfeit or feigning. Basically, almost like, or imitation. Something is imitating something. It's not exactly what it is, but it's imitating it. It's simulating it. So what exactly does Gran Turismo simulate? It says the real driving simulator? Or is it the real racing? I think it's the real driving simulator. So, is it real? In what terms? Virtual real? Real? What kind of real are we talking about? Because words determine what something is. They describe things. Simulate. Racing. So, what is racing? It's a competition of speed. If you look up the basic definition of what racing is, it's a competition of speed. Who can get to the line, the finish line? Who can get to the finish line the fastest? It's a competition of speed. And those main things that you tend to have are people that are movement of some sort, and a clock, and a finish line, and a distance that needs to be traveled. Who can get to this particular line the fastest? It's a competition of speed. Does Gran Turismo do that? Now, you're not moving. It's a simulation of movement because the game is not moving. I mean, yes, in the internal workings of the game, if you want to use the term architecture, which we will come back to, if you want to use that particular term, then you can use that. In the architecture of the game, the cars give the simulation of movement. It's a video game. What you perceive as movement is not really movement. The car is not really moving. Or is it? It's a perceptual thing. So it's a simulation. That's where we come. That's where we get when we start talking about the words, the definitions of the word simulation. We start talking about counterfeit, or fake, or feign, or imitation. It's more of a mental thing. I'm moving. Those cars around me, they're moving. So does Gran Turismo cover that? It's simulating movement. It's simulating racing. It's simulating reality. The real racing or the real driving simulator. I am driving at the moment. I'm driving. So it's a racing simulator. It's a driving simulator. It's a simulator. Now, some people have decided to try to say it's called an arcade game. It's a simcade, meaning simulation versus arcade. Or it's a combination of the word simulation and arcade, so they call it a simcade. Now, here is where it gets interesting. Gran Turismo is not an arcade game, and here's why. It's really quite simple why Gran Turismo is not an arcade game, and it never was. An arcade has architecture as its foundation. It's talking about architecture. It's usually talking about a series of columns and passageways. If you've ever seen arches, you see my steering wheel? My steering wheel has an arch. That's an arch. But it's not exactly the same type of arch because this is a wheel. It's like what we said. Words have meanings. Words have definitions. They describe what something is. There's a difference between a finger and a cup. There's a difference. There's a huge difference. So when you think about the word arcade and look at its definitions, because most people don't know what definitions means because they went and looked it up. They know what words mean because they asked somebody what something means. Somebody spoke a word and then they asked somebody, hey, what does that word mean? And somebody told them what it meant. The problem is human beings can make mistakes. We have physical problems that allow our brains can really get things confused. They really do get things confused, and it happens quite often. So even somebody could mix up a word, you know. Somebody could be talking about somebody can get the difference between a stalagmite and a stalactite mixed up, you know. A person can get that mixed up, you know. Again, words define things. They have definitions. They tell us what things are. They explain what things are. Like for instance, you got car, truck, SUV, you know? So, I mean, steering wheel, this is a steering wheel. This is a button. These are buttons, you know? That's somebody say it's a sigil or a sign, you know? But things have meanings. Everything in the universe has a name. Some things we don't have names for yet, you know, but most things have names. So when we get to the term arcade is more about passageways with arches and a covering. You get a little further down, it starts to get into the terms of like buildings, like shops, like an amusement arcade or a game arcade. Now, what is an arcade when we're talking about video games? What is an arcade as it relates to video game? It's a public place that you go to where they have coin-operated games that you put money in. Coin-operated games. It's a public place where you go to play coin-operated games. That's what an arcade is. And for that definition right there, and there are not too many definitions. Usually a word has multiple definitions, but the definitions only go so far. Now you can look up you can look at many places where the source of definitions are. You can look up the Oxford English Dictionary. You can look up dictionary.com. You know, you can look up Webster's Dictionary. Those are the three main ones. You can go to Wikipedia. But when you look up the term arcade, it is in terms of video games, it's an architectural structure, a public place where you go. A public place that houses coin-operated machinery where people can go to play. Coin-operated games where people go to play. And that definition right there in terms of video game, a video game arcade, that is the reason right there. That definition right there is the very reason why Gran Turismo is not an arcade game and never was. Gran Turismo has always been a home arcade game. It's always been a home game, a home console game. I'm not arcade, a home console game. Gran Turismo was never an arcade game because it was never in an arcade. You've never had to put coins in Gran Turismo in a game to play Gran Turismo. You've never had to do it. For that definition alone. Now, people will start saying, no, we're talking about the way we're talking about the way arcade games work. Yeah? But still, even arcade games operate on a basic physics level. When you just take Mortal Kombat, when you press the button for jumping, when you press the button to jump, what happens to the character in the game? He goes up in the air, but he comes right back down because of the physics of the game. Gran Turismo has physics. Assetto Corsa has physics. Assetto Corsa Competizione has physics. iRacing has physics. They all have physics. The real world physics, and then there's video game physics. But Gran Turismo was never an arcade game because it was never in an arcade. Now, and when you're talking about how arcade games work, arcade games still work on a principle of physics because the game is in a physical location. The game is software, but it needs the physics of the game in order to operate. So it's still physics. It starts to get very, very complicated. So you start to, okay, what do we do now? What are we trying to compare it to? Okay, if you want to compare video game physics to real world physics, then you have to start using ratios. If you're going to say Gran Turismo is a simulation, but it's simulation efficiency to the real world physics, as far as asphalt, steering wheel physics, grip, fuel, tire wear, fuel consumption, all the different things that happens in real world automobile racing. Gran Turismo is only going to do it to a level of efficiency of maybe about what? 61%, 62%? I don't know exactly. Assetto Corsa may do it at maybe in the 70s. iRacing may do it in the 80s. But that's what you would have to determine. You know, the level of efficiency of the simulator as opposed to the saying that it's not a simulator. Because it does all those things. It simulates driving. It simulates racing. And those are the two main things. It simulates driving and it simulates racing. So but when we get to whether or not Gran Turismo is an arcade game, it was never an arcade game because it was never in an arcade. It was never in an arcade. So with that, I'm going to just maybe let this go. I might do another video. This is I just wanted to, but my mind was racing with all these different thoughts because one of the things I deal with often is talking about philosophy and what words mean and stuff like that. But at the foundation of any kind of conversation that you're having, if everybody's not on the same page about what the word means, there's really no point. You know, but Gran Turismo was never an arcade game because it was never in an arcade. It was never a coin-operated machine because of what the word arcade means. Gran Turismo was never an arcade game. It's always simulated driving. You know, it always simulated driving. It always simulated racing. And those are the two main things that Gran Turismo deals with: driving, racing. And there you go. So with that, I'm going to get back to work. Y'all have a good one.